Hello class. So welcome back to another topic on hazard assessment, and this will be I will have a quick look into different hazard assessment approaches to assess different hazards. So generally there are different types of approaches or which we can use to determine hazard. S- So this is, are we going to be measuring hazard quantitatively or qualitatively? Are we going to be measuring it using deterministic approach or probabilistic approach? Or like kind of we might go for a mixed or hybrid approach. So let's have a brief look at different approaches. So the first one which is the quantitative approach. So here in terms we are going to be quantifying the hazard values, and we are going to be determining values for each variables which we have discussed in previous lectures, like magnitude, onsets, time, duration, frequency. And using that quantitative approach, we are going to be measuring a hazard value, and we will be donating uh, the value of a hazard with certain data. So that numerical value will show the probable, you can say, the impact of that hazard. The higher the value is, the more destructful potential threat or potential it has to destroy or impact the society. And now this is usually done by collecting a lot of data, and using some different principles we establish relationship between different variables, and then maybe we will use to we can uh, merge them together, or using some kind of input in a model we can modify or update our models to represent the true picture. But sometimes it's not available for all hazards, and it we might have to go for the another approach, that is qualitative approach. For example, flooding. So flood dimension is, there are different flood dimension is there. So what are we going to be incorporating in our model and what not, what sort of data we have, what sort of data we don't have. So that all depends upon the availability of data. So quantitative approach. The other one is, as the name suggests, is the qualitative approach, in which we rank the hazard value into in a particular scale, 1 to 5 scale, 1 to 3 scale, to assess a hazard event. And we use that in when there is a lack of sufficient data for quantitative assessment, or where some variables cannot be expressed numerically. Other approach, the other one is deterministic versus probabilistic approach, in which we are talking about, we know that a past event has happened and it has impacted a particular area, and this sort of consequences were faced by those society. And then when maybe we can extrapolate that sort of data, and we overlay it with the current conditions, and then we might be able to assess what sort of impacts or will it have. So deterministic approach, using the data and then comparing it with the today's situation or the another regions. So we associate those data sets together to find out or determine what sort of potential impact it may have. So it has also, of course, all these approaches like qualitative, quantitative, deterministic, or probabilistic, they always have issue of, they have data issues, or there always be some unknown variables which these approaches cannot handle. So another approach is probabilistic approach, in which, depending on the data and the time periods, we we play with the probabilities. When will a certain hazard will occur in an area of certain magnitude? So that is a probabilistic approach, and that is usually in terms of, also it can be quantifiable or it can be go into qualitative mode as well. So basically it is probability of occurrence is calculated based on the past events of hazards. So now these are the approaches. So what do we do? Well, the first things which come to the mind is that hazard assessment is necessary for hazard mitigation. So for doing risk assessment, overall risk assessment or disaster risk assessment, hazard assessment is very important. So it is the first part of your risk assessment. So all the information ideally should include the location, severity, frequency, and the probability of occurrence. So these are, so again, coming back to some different, how are we going to be collecting that data? So location data can be easiest for the planners because of these so many different remote sensing and GIS, and news stations have been set up to cope or you collect data on daily basis. And then is your when something is associated with the location or spatial, then it can help the policymakers or decision makers to develop that area according to that disaster hazard, according to that potential hazard, so we can minimize or mitigate the hazard impacts. So again, there are different types and different ways of collecting data we have talked about in the previous presentation as well, in terms of historical data and knowledge of community, that what have they experienced. So we can also have this is usually called community based disaster risk management, in which we involve the communities to ascertain what sort of hazard have they faced in the past and how much are they ready for the future. So another is, if we have the particular record, unfortunately in terms of Pakistan, we are country database, although it's the last 5-10 years it has become very good, but that data sets are not so much reliable for estimating or doing hazard assessment. So which we more rely more on some international agencies which have kept the data of different hazards in the world. So that database is very important for hazard assessments. If it's not there, it becomes very difficult to have a probabilistic approach in assessing hazard. And then again, when we talked about the mapping, that mapping is the main output of hazard assessment, in which we donate we uh, show the public where is the hazard values are high, or to the planners where the hazard values are high and those areas are to be avoided, or the development which is going to be done in that area, it should be resistant to the particular hazard. So hazard maps is there, and of course in one area there are bound to be different hazards available in the environment. So we go for multiple hazard mapping. So multiple hazard or multi-hazard mapping is very important. So different hazard maps can be overlaid to find out what are the most hotspots or areas where a lot of threat is there due to different these multiple hazards. So that is, we work on a composite or synthesis or overlay map in terms of multiple hazard mapping. And generally, the scales are set for depending upon what sort of development are we going to be doing. That hazard maps can be specific, can be more generic, and depending upon each the spatial scale, the information in these multiple hazard maps might vary. So scale is an important factor in which we narrow down what sort of hazard we will be scaling or which will be assessing. So these are the approaches to do hazard assessment. Thank you.